welcome back. I know it's been a minute. First, Persistent got sick and then I got sick. When Persistent comes back, you're gonna have to grill her on why she's not here, okay? Just because it would be funny. I don't know. That's about it, honestly. Today's episode is actually sponsored, and it's sponsored by Vooglam. Vooglam is a glasses brand and they are specializing in having really interesting designs while at the same time still offering something affordable for people to purchase. I've got 5 pairs to show you today to try them on. And for those of you who are listening to the show and not watching it, I'm going to also describe them to you briefly. So the first pair is a little bit more on a safer side, a bit more classic, except for the design on the side. As you can see right here, I would say that this is honestly pretty easy to style or to wear. It's not super crazy where it would be really difficult to choose something to wear with it. However, it could still be a pretty good everyday look. I know that the frame is pretty thick, but I personally don't mind that. It's what it looks like at the back. And then it looks pretty normal at the front, you know? Party at the back. This pair, yeah. It's a pair of glasses that has a pretty interesting color combination. You got white on the top and on the bottom, but diagonally. So you basically kind of have a frame that has white and black on both sides of the frame. I personally like this more. This is so 2000s, don't you think? Specifically this type of detailing, it just always screams 2000s to me. Here is the side, a little bit closer. For those of you who are listening, it is a hole of some sort, or kind of like a circular piece on the sides, on the handles. The next one, I think I'm gonna do the craziest pair out of them all, probably just because of how geometric it is and how much it makes me feel like a cartoon character, honestly. But yeah, once again, really big frame, but it has a rectangular kind of shape. It's purple. And it genuinely just makes me feel like a cartoon character. Doesn't it remind you of so many cartoon glasses? The handles are a bit darker than the front, but I do think it's a fun look. And now for the final one, wait for it because it's matching with the visual theme of this season. Wait one sec. Okay, you ready? Look at them. They have a leopard on the handles. Yeah, thank you everyone. I feel like it just fits my whole vibe for this season. These ones are prescription. You can obviously see that, but who amongst us are wearing glasses without a prescription? I mean, most people don't, right? So thank you to Vooglam for sponsoring this episode. And let's get back into the topics of today. I kind of got from the response, I don't think people who watch this podcast care that much about Severance, which is honestly very fair because I do think I have a bit of a controversial opinion on season 2. And it's not... Listen, there's no spoilers here, so you don't have to be worried about that. If you're planning on watching it at some point or whatever, like, don't worry, I'm not gonna spoil anything. I just want to simply say a couple of things that I'm thinking about this show and about shows like Severance in general. Most of my thoughts on it are about how strange shows like these really are, just because I don't think a lot of people who decide to write these shows realize that you're gonna have to really follow through on the entirety of the story, and I think that many of them are working in very difficult conditions after season 1. If they see a huge uptick in interest in their show, I feel like a lot of people are struggling under the weight of having to follow through, maybe not follow through, but finish this storyline and make it make sense. I feel like with season 2, I have been feeling kind of like the writers are starting to write themselves into a corner. If you have any specific questions about it, you can always ask me in the comments and I can respond specifically to some of your, thoughts on this if you're also thinking so. But I think that I was just feeling like the depth of their exploration of identity and of what makes you you and how conditions can change you, nurture versus nature, on top of things like how brains even work, which part of it is our identity, other things like that. There's a lot of things that are interesting about the premise of the show. There are a couple of episodes that are absolutely fantastic, like the one that centers on Irving. I think it's episode 4, and I would say that episode is quite well done, but also I'm a little bit biased because the entire episode is honestly, they have Russian fashion going on there, which I wouldn't say is specifically Russian. It's more like a blend, obviously, of every single culture that lives in the north and has a lot of snow and cold temperatures to deal with. I think that there's like, for example, there's a hat that they're wearing, which is very much a Caucasus hat, like the style of it, but it is very popular in any country that has a lot of snow and really kind of harsh conditions in the winter. So I am a little bit biased because I do like that shit. Obvi. I mean, many people who lived in Siberia don't like that, but I do. Like, what are you gonna do about that? I feel like aesthetically speaking, this show really does bring their A game. There's a lot of things like, for example, the prop designer from the show. I'm not sure if you guys are familiar with the way that their computers are looking, but they're kind of very old school with a lot of really weird cursors. Maybe not cursors. What would you call it? Kind of like a touchpad or a mouse for a computer. It's kind of like this ball that moves around inside of the keyboard, I guess. Turns out that those computers are actually functional and that the prop designer made that kind of joystick or whatever the hell you would call that. And it's just really impressive how much detail she put into this research and into making this thing work. It's very well done. However, on the concept of severance itself, on the concept of multiple identities, things like that, I think that they're a little bit, like they're struggling quite a bit with that. And I'm not really surprised because we're dealing with people who are kind of in this weird limbo where they might not even see, like they do know that they're trying to comment on capitalism and its effects on people, but they're kind of struggling with actually condemning it. They're struggling with realizing the scope of its impact, that it's way beyond the individual and it's way beyond this hypothetical dystopian future. It's very much here now and it's already happening. And I feel like it's just kind of really strange to see people who haven't confronted this kind of fact that they're not talking about fiction anymore. And even if they think that they're confronting it, I get the same type of energy from them and the same type of attitude as from people who don't have very consistent beliefs or political affiliations. I'm not even saying affiliations specifically with like a party or something like that. I just mean like their views on the world are very contradictory and they are struggling to reconcile them because they want to be tolerant or they want to be a good person in quotations, but then they have a really, really hard time realizing that you cannot be a helpful or a kind, responsible, any of those person, while at the same time not giving a fuck about the reality that they are dealing with, not thinking about what they have to see, experience, touch, like physical, real, material things around them. Like you can't just be tolerant in some kind of theoretical way, in some kind of theoretical fashion where it's only on paper, and even then it might not even be on paper because all the due diligence and due processes are being dismantled currently. So it's kind of like really weird when you're watching shows like this and you're realizing that these are people who want to be just perceived as intellectual, somehow in touch with reality, while at the same time they're completely not interested in it at all. Because if they would be a lot more intentional about it. And I think that honestly, it's not even about the writer who's working on it, and obviously many other writers who are working on it, I assume. I don't know the list of all the people who are working on it, but I do know that one person who's really making me doubt this whole operation is Ben Stiller, and I have talked about that before in the previous episode. I don't even want to like spend too much time on it. However, this is kind of what I'm thinking, is that this season has a lot of good points, a lot of high points, while at the same time I can clearly see that a lot of the things that they're writing into the show or that they're exploring, they seem to be putting in a lot of details that don't have a resolution that would be satisfying. And also I think that the entire company of Lumen is really difficult to ground because they have gotten so far into the whole cure lore and this religious kind of aspect of the company, which wouldn't be that crazy considering that MLMs exist and whatever, if Lumen wasn't so theatrical to a point where it is detrimental to it in really weird ways. I feel like there's kind of this aspect of frogs being boiled, that's missing from this whole scenario, where people would be kind of dipped into this world and the heat would have been turned up really slowly. It feels like they just kind of fucking boiled the water and threw the frogs in, and they don't give a fuck that the frogs will jump out because they already know that the water is hot. And it's just, I think that they're struggling with realism, basically. Aside that, I think that another kind of topic that comes out from this whole severance conversation, and what I've talked about last week, where I talked about having a hard time not severing yourself and having a hard time not being kind of caught in this weird limbo. I started to think about but I've been thinking about the constant policing that we're doing to ourselves and to each other, and specifically from this whole conversation, the fact that we have kind of made the perception of reality so flat, especially when it comes to online lives, where I feel like this, actually, let me give you an example of what I mean. It's going to be a little bit easier to explain it that way, but do you remember that moment on TikTok where there were two girls at some game sitting behind another girl who was filming herself, and they started making fun of her or something like that, and then this girl who was sitting in front of them posted that video. It went viral and people attacked those two girls who were sitting behind her. I think they lost their jobs because of that whole debacle. I think the people kind of attacked the places of employment. And then after that, I think that there was this other thing that kind of brought it up again for me, and it is this this journalist in Canada who, she primarily makes videos on TikTok, and she was, self-producing, and then CNN, I think it was CBC. If I'm wrong, I'm gonna correct myself in, like on the screen somewhere, but
it was actually CTV. Oops.
She kind of like got this position at CBC to do fact checking for the Canadian race for the new prime minister position. The news station or the news conglomerate, whatever the hell you want to call it, they got attacked by a bunch of right wingers because they're really pissed at this girl. I don't know how left her politics are. Definitely left enough for the right wingers to be pissed at her. But I would tell you, honestly, in America, in North America, it doesn't take that much to be attacked by right wingers, honestly, because they have such far right politics that anything that's not literally like fascist bullshit is considered to be too left, and they jump on it. So later, she actually lost this opportunity. She didn't even get to do one day of reporting for that company. They kicked her out, and she recorded their conversation because she was like, I have a feeling this is going to be about the backlash that they got, which is, honestly, to me, this is so idiotic, but we'll get back to it in a second. So she didn't do even one day of reporting for them, and they let her go. And in the conversation that she recorded, the person who was letting her go, they were like, yeah, it's because of the backlash that we received. Obviously, there was no issues. They didn't have any issues with her reporting. They didn't have any issues with her research. When it comes to actually serious critiques, not just a bunch of, incels being mad or some shit like that. So it was really strange to see that a news station can take the heat for one day. For one fucking day. They couldn't take the heat. And the heat was about something that is just very run-of-the-mill kind of centrist approach. So I honestly, I'm horrified at the state of affairs in Canada. I don't know what we're going to be doing, how we're going to go about this, because I genuinely do not love that even our news stations are allowing a bunch of like freaks to bully them into being quiet. That's insane. This is just an insane situation. And all of these things kind of brought back this cultural phenomena of people being able to lose jobs, lose opportunities, lose like sometimes even their lives, but we're talking about something that's not done by individuals who are looking for violence, but rather people who are trying to police others to an extreme. And obviously these two situations are very different. And I'm actually working on in my head. I haven't started writing it yet, but I'm working in my head on a video essay that's going to be talking about how we kind of have this weird mentality now that if we didn't like someone online, if we just think that they're annoying, or if we just have like some kind of distaste for somebody, we think that we have the right to take their income away, which is really, really weird because it's like, okay, so who do you think is going to pay their bills? Who do you think is going to take care of that? It's going to be taken care of by either our tax dollars, right? Or it's going to be something that's going to become an issue in terms of people becoming unhoused, other things like that. Like how, like I just feel like it's so weird to go from, oh, they're being mean girls to this girl at this stadium and this girl was just like filming it or whatever, right? To calling their jobs and getting them fired to the point where I feel like people are don't like not realizing that most of the time the most destabilizing type of abuse that you could inflict on somebody, especially in the world that is extremely materialistic, is taking away their income. And I think that honestly, just it's not like I even have much empathy for these girls in terms of being like, yeah, it's just sometimes you say fucked up shit to strangers for no reason. Like, no. And also, they weren't like, obviously, they weren't saying something completely off the wall. They were just being mean girls, which is not great. Obviously, if I had the, choice to talk to them or not, I wouldn't. But I just don't think that putting them at risk of losing their livelihoods and becoming unhoused or something, or not being able to afford their medication, other shit like that, is an equitable kind of response. And at the same time, it's just I also feel really nasty about the fact that I'm also guilty of that, by the way, but this mentality, not calling somebody and trying to fire them, but this mentality of being like, well, they have to be reprimanded for this or whatever, which I think like there's something I feel really conflicted about this in particular, because on one hand, I really don't like that we have such a weird fucking policing mentality. Like, why the hell are we constantly talking about this shit? Why are we always trying to figure out a punishment for someone when it's not even our fucking jobs? But at the same time, I understand that if behavior that is negative goes unchecked, it's just going to get worse and gets more pervasive. And it's just always going to be a weird kind of combo for me personally, where I just think we're in a really weird situation now where even people who are not involved in some conflict, who are extremely, extremely far removed, instead of like their contribution being only of support of the person who has suffered some kind of injustice, it's to step into the boots of this, persecution or this police related mentality. I don't know how to feel about that. Let me know if you guys have been thinking about this too, if you have any thoughts on this. But I kind of started compiling situations that felt very similar to me, and especially those that kind of have different types of background. Like, for example, one of them where they were mean girls, I clearly don't agree with them, acting the way that they did. While at the same time, I feel like the response was so astronomical, while also being so impersonal, because nobody knew them or anything like that. It was just people, running after them. While there's also situations like, for example, with this journalist where she didn't do anything wrong. She just wasn't a literal Nazi and people got mad at her. To situations where, for example, there's this person on TikTok, their name's Shaheem, and I was watching this weird kind of, I guess, controversy unfold where they kind of talked about this whole debacle, this whole like conversation that people were having about having children or not having children, when you're poor, and how it could be or could not be either eugenics or irresponsible on the part of the person who's becoming a parent, other things like that. And basically, as far as I understand, their position was kind of being like, this is eugenics, like it's too far. In any case, I'm going to try and kind of synthesize this information and maybe come up with some better thought experiments that would make it a video that kind of can explore this phenomenon, because I think it's really weird. Because Shahim had a bunch of people calling their workplace, I believe, or some kind of board, because I think that they're certified therapists or something like that. And it just made me feel so weird and icky that people thought that because they didn't like their opinion, they can just try and like get them fired. Really weird behavior. And I think this has become so prevalent to the point where I think that it's disrupting a lot of people's lives in a really disproportionate way. Well, at the same time, I also think, this particular topic is showing the difference and the complexity of the interaction between the real world and the online world, and how the algorithms are disrupting the material relationships and the fabric of small scale connections and kind of fabric of society to compare to huge pieces of society, like the way that it disrupts a small community. By small, I mean that like this person and their immediate acquaintances, co-workers and stuff like that, their lives, to compare to how it would usually go if it was some kind of personal conflict. And usually personal conflicts that are based on opinions are solved personally. And in this case, where we kind of have these two worlds of the online and the offline enmeshing in the most weird fucking way, to the point where I think we're gonna have to address it and think about it a little bit more, and think about what is and isn't acceptable or normal. Because I think that a lot of the older generations, a lot of people who are, for example, they were on news stations, and they are not used to having this many people yelling at them at the same time. Instead of getting mail, with people who actually gave a fuck to write a whole letter and send it out and whatever, you have a bunch of people who can send the most vile shit within literally 2 minutes of them seeing some kind of video or some kind of report or whatever the hell. So I think it's a really weird place to be in, especially when you're working in the arts and media and culture sectors, because it's like, okay, so you guys are not like, by you guys, I mean older people in this industry and people who have gotten into this industry because of like their parents' connection, stuff like that. You're not equipped for the realities of this enmeshment of the online world and the offline world, and how it affects, for example, reporting, being a journalist, being a public facing persona, being an actor, being whatever it is that's public facing. You cannot have the same attitude any longer, where you get 100 bad comments and you just decide that that person is not good for the for the news station or whatever the hell, unless it's just really weird where there's nothing that she's actually done. There's nothing actually bad that she has caused. And in many of the situations, the sin that they have committed is having an opinion that somebody didn't like, and someone might have even twisted. Because as we know, this is another thing that's kind of bothering me a lot lately, is the perception that people have of these public figures is seeping into the perceptions that people think are normal or acceptable when it comes to people who are public facing, but they're not really a celebrity, like kind of like micro influencers and other things like that. People who have to have a job outside of whatever they're providing online. It's really weird to see that people are not realizing that attacking someone who's a billionaire is not going to make them starve or become unhoused. but it will do one of those things, if not both, to somebody who is working at a regular either minimum wage job or um, slightly higher than minimum wage job, and someone who's creating some videos online on whatever. It's really weird that most of the time people who are suffering from these types of disproportionate reactions from the public are people who actually wouldn't be able to withstand it, while at the same time we're kind of thinning out the herd because we have on the left, I think that we do not have really big creators. We only have, or like big influences on media, etc., etc. We have some liberal ones, but liberal ones are still right wing, so it's not even close to being actually left wing influence. And I think that this is a really important issue here where we kind of have a lot of micro influencers or micro um, accounts, because I think it's actually healthy for any group to have a bunch of smaller influences than one big influence that can change the wave entirely within the group. However, I think it's kind of detrimental for us to realize that in this case, we cannot be this carceral and that we can't have this hyena type of behavior where we're ready to fucking rip somebody apart for any misstep, at least, even honestly, sometimes just perceived misstep. Sometimes those people are actually right, but the group is already on a bandwagon, and it's kind of really difficult to get people off of it. So, yeah, even though, I don't know, dude, the arts recently have been really underwhelming for me because I think that I'm starting to have a real distaste for a lot of people who have this weird pompous and this maybe not pompous, but they have this self-importance that tells them that them just making, for example, just abstract art with no concept or input that is important to a larger conversation or movement or anything like that. I feel like there's so many people who make art very haphazardly, who don't give a fuck about the role of the artist in society, to the point where I'm really struggling talking about artists. Every time I start reading about them, I read their fucking diaries or their letters to each other, and I'm like, ew. I try to, it's really weird. I'm always going to say in this podcast that I have a very volatile love-hate relationship with the arts. And to those people who are always like, oh, this podcast always turns into a political conversation, I'm like, yeah, life is politics, art is politics. It's unfortunate because I fucking hate the things that we have to talk about and deal with today. It's not fun, it's not exciting, and it's making me super annoyed. And I actually hate how much it sips into my everyday interactions, to the point where I really can't find anything else to talk about because of how much everything annoys me, specifically because it feels like it's dismissive of the reality that we're in. Hopa is like crawling around, getting under tables, and I don't know why. I don't know what the hell she's trying to do. I'm gonna be real with you. But whenever she gets under something, like under a table to lie down, I always get nervous. Do you know what I mean? For those of you who don't know, Hopa is my dog. Let me know what's bringing you joy recently. What is making it, like, what do you do when you're not taken by misery of the situation that we're in? Please let me know, because I know I always ask about this, but I just kind of want to, remind people that they can leave their suggestions, because I do be falling into this weird mentality where, like, I know I'm making it more difficult for people who are like in my life day to day, just because of how not negative but news driven and serious to a fault I kind of have become. Here's Lisa tries to be positive section, because, well, we need it. What am I gonna tell you? So first of all, this meme, someone posted on Twitter this photo of Tate McRae, and this Skype logo, and they said Tate McRae addresses the decline in Skype users. Yeah, I remember using it. And someone quote tweeted quote tweeted it and said, "Glad she finally said something." And if it's not funny when I'm reading it, well, you just have to look at it, bitch. I don't know what to tell ya. I don't know what to tell ya. Another thing that I've been like literally obsessed with recently is a bunch of panda videos, specifically panda core videos, you know. I really hate the sound of the core videos. Do you know what I mean? Like that wah, 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 in the background. It really makes me feel so uneasy and unsettled. I feel like it has something, because it's the chord itself has this unresolved while also slightly atonal kind of vibe to it, to the point where every time I hear it in the background, I'm like, this video would have been 300 times better without it. How about that? That's why I enjoy videos, like compilations of the mentality, more than I do some kind of core, like panda core video, whatever. Hoppa! Anyway, my dog literally took down the lights. I'll be back soon, you guys. Let me know what you think. Let me know what's new. And if you have any suggestions as to how to be a happy-go-lucky girl. Bye.